introduction, okay?
All right, well, perfect. Well, hello everyone. Meet Tina here. Welcome to my channel and also to this very special day. I invite my dear friend who's another influencer on YouTube. She has a lot of followers from Thailand, Awakening with Natalie. Hello, Natalie. Welcome to the channel
Hello.
here. Hello. And well, we got a special guest here, Rizwan Virk. I don't know if anyone not knowing of him. I mean, he's all over YouTube. But anyway, just a little bit intro about him. I don't want to go way too long because we want to get to the meat. All right. So he's a successful entrepreneur in the Silicon Valley. He's an MIT scientist and he's a best author selling books on Amazon. I know there's three of them already, right? I bought one of them, and I met Rizwan at the Conscious Live Expo, and I was so impressed. Look at the book that Natalie is showing. It's
The simulation.
simulation in a different, I think, realities or multiverse. That's what it is. Actually, I have interest in that book. I heard that. And last night I was watching one of the YouTube about this topic and I didn't get to finish that. So we're gonna have we have a lot of questions, but we're gonna dive right into it, Rizwan. I'm not gonna ask you to introduce yourself. Anyone can go to his website. Okay, so Natalie is gonna show the web page of Rizwan. You can contact him. But let's begin with the first question, Rizwan. First question is about karma because we're from Thailand, and a lot of Thai people believe in karma. Now we're talking about that we are in the game in this simulation. Karma works in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think the big idea that my books talk about is the same idea that has been in various religious traditions, for thousands of years, going back to Hinduism, going to Buddhist precepts, and even in the Islamic traditions, which I grew up in, and that is that the physical world is not the real world, that the physical world is a kind of Maya or illusion or even in Arabic there's words for delusion, but it's a certain kind of delusion. It's an enjoyable delusion, even though things in the world may not always be enjoyable from our perspective. And so the modern metaphor that I think works for this, because all of these traditions had their scriptural texts come out thousands of years ago. And so if we were to rewrite those spiritual texts today, I think we would say that the world is like an illusion. It's like a movie where you're watching on a movie screen where it gets projected. That's a metaphor that Swami Yogananda liked to use, for example, who wrote Autobiography of a Yogi. And for him in 1920, that was the latest technology, was a movie projector. That was new technology. And so he used it to explain to people that the world isn't quite real and that what we're seeing on the screen are images and parts that we choose to play. And so if, the Swamis of old were alive today, I believe they would say that the world is like a movie, but it's an interactive one. We are all actors. We're all playing parts, but we're also watching the movie, and we can change the movie. We can change the script. And so that sounds like a massively multiplayer online role-playing video game, right? And so when we have video games where there's millions of people playing, right? Games like Fortnite or World of Warcraft or League of Legends and many different ones in Asia as well. And, when I was an entrepreneur, I was in the video game industry. And so, this analogy that the world is like a game is a good way for us to think about our players and our character in the game. So inside the game, we have an avatar, but outside, there's the player. And that tends to map to this idea that there is a part of us that exists outside the specific game that we're playing. I mean, the truth of the matter is, we're not really talking to each other right now, right? I'm talking to my computer, and you and Natalie are seeing my image on your computer. And similarly, I'm not really hearing your voice. I'm hearing the computer reproduce your voice. So in a sense, all of this communication is digital. And so taking that up to a higher level to say that even when we're in the same room, we're actually part of this interactive video game. And so that's the background. And so to your question then, which is, how does karma relate to this? Well, inside a video game, you have quests, you have achievements, right? You have challenges. In fact, there's a saying in the video game industry, which if you go back to the very first video game that was popular ever, was a game called Pong, which was two squares and a dot. It was a ping pong type game, right? And what happened was a few years ago, I was put on a virtual reality headset and I started to play this ping pong game, virtual reality ping pong. And it was so realistic that for a moment, my body forgot that I was inside of virtual reality. I thought I was playing a real game. And so much so that I tried to put the paddle down on the table and I tried to lean against the table, just like I might at the end of a real game of table tennis. Of course, there was no table. And that's when I began to think that, oh, if our virtual reality can fool us today, even for a few minutes, what if the whole world is an advanced video game that is fooling us into thinking that we are in the real world when in fact we're not in the real world, right? And so the translation of Maya from the Indian Sanskrit usually gets translated as illusion, but there's a more subtle understanding, which is that it is a carefully crafted illusion. So in the sense that if we go to see a magic show, I don't know if you've ever gone to see a magician on the stage, you know that he's not really sawing that woman in half, right? But you want to believe it because that's what makes it exciting, right? And so Maya is almost where we fool ourselves into of the illusion as being real, right? So it's a carefully crafted illusion. And in the Islamic text, they even say it's a game, it's a pastime, it's a sport. So they use these Arabic words which translate to this idea of game. Now, Maya also means that it's also the process of creating what is happening around us, right? And this relates to the video game idea very much because there's an old Hindu story of the god Vishnu who this warrior named Narada says, I want to understand what Maya is, right? And Vishnu says, well, you can't understand it, I'll have to show you. Step into this water. So this great warrior, very proud warrior, steps into the water and suddenly he becomes a little baby girl named Sushila, and he's living the life, who's a princess, somewhere in India, let's say a long time ago. And she grows up and she marries another prince, and the prince has a fight with her father and they kill each other. And now she's sad because her husband and her father have both killed each other in a war, and she's crying and she steps into a pool of water and suddenly she wakes up. She's with Vishnu again and she's back to being Narada. And he goes, that's Maya, right? You thought you were Sushila, but you're really not. And so, the modern version of that is you put on a helmet and you become this character that you think you are this character, but you really aren't. And so what does this character do? The character has a story arc, right? In this case, she was a princess. That's part of the karma within the game. So I think of karma as the database of different quests and challenges and achievements that we have to go through in this particular game. And as we go through the game, we create more and more of these for ourselves, right? So the database gets bigger and bigger. And so as we play the game, we try to take off some of these, but then we keep adding to them. And then that is what keeps the wheel of samsara rolling round and round. But from a more modern perspective, we would say that means your database exists in the cloud, outside of the physical rendered world. And so when you're done playing with this particular world, this particular character, when I'm done playing, Rizwan, and you're done playing Tina, now you still have this database. And so you have to figure out which of those items are going to be in your next character. So you're choosing the types of things that you will have to deal with. And so, within a video game, you can also think about things. And so, karma is not just, in the West, we think of karma as simply, you went and killed that person gets to kill you, right? Right. And in the West, that's a very simplified understanding. In the East, I think they have a better understanding of the subtleties. But, so karma is the force that creates the situations for us in the game itself. And so we do that with a game engine when we build video games. So I used to build video games for about a decade, and then I was an investor in many video game companies. And so we have an engine that's a physics engine that creates the physics around you. We have the character engine, with the character selection where you choose, okay, what type of character do you want to be? And then we have the quest engine that chooses the situations. And sometimes you and I may have some karma together. And so we have a quest that we have to jointly go after. And the way that it works, I think, in the video game analysis is that the challenge is presented. You and I accept that challenge. And then we go and we have that particular experience within the game itself. So that's how I think karma relates to the idea that we live inside a simulation or a video game.
Okay, that's interesting. So now let's just say the karma that in the Eastern belief that, we have to keep coming back and pay back the karma. I mean, is that how the game works, in this Maya, in this illusion? Do we actually coming back many times to really, what you just said, to create more challenges or to create more extensive database? And what about person wanted to end that karma? How's that
Right.
work? Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the easiest way to explain it is to use analogies from metaphors and stories. So, my latest book is called Wisdom of a Yogi, which is about Swami Yogananda, who wrote Autobiography of a Yogi. And I like to use stories sometimes that he told in the Eastern traditions and then tie them to to the video game idea of the world. And so there's a story of Yogananda's guru's guru, a guy named Lahiri, who went into the mountains and met this seemingly immortal being named Babaji, who was many hundreds of years old and still lived in the Himalayas. And he was going to initiate him because he remembered him from a past life. He's like, Lahiri, I have found you again. And Lahiri said, I don't know who you are. Because that's because you don't remember. You used to meditate in this cave right here. And here's your old blanket that you used to sit and meditate on. And so he said he went through an initiation technique to cause him to remember the previous times that he was a player, right? His previous existences. And then he said, okay, come out and we're going to do an initiation. And so Lahiri walked into the Himalayas and he saw this giant palace created out of nothing. Right. And now some people might say, well, this sounds like a crazy story. Nobody can materialize a palace in the Himalayas like, out of thin air. Maybe Yogananda read the Arabian Nights and the story of Aladdin and the jinns, right? But he tells this story. And so Lahiri says, where did this palace come from? And he goes through the initiation and his guru tells him, in a previous life, you expressed a very strong desire to live in a palace and be like a prince. And so I've created this dream palace for you as an experience so that now, once we go through this, he dissolved it. And he said, now that karma has been dissolved. You don't have to go and live a whole life as a prince in a palace, right? And so to me, that's very much how we create things inside a video game, right? Inside a video game, you can easily create material objects. You can render them and de-render them out of pixels of light. And so, this idea is that karma is not just a database of actions, but it becomes a database of desires and our reactions, right? And so what's happening is that the game is recording everything, that we do along the way. And that those experiences are then experiences that get put in the database, but we can resolve those experiences because many of them are based on our reactions and other people's reactions and feelings, right? And that's why, the Buddha always emphasized just being in the moment, right? That it was about grasping and creating the moment at each time. So I like to think if we're here having certain challenges and experiences, there's a value to those. Like, why do we play video games, right? So we play video games. Why do we play video games? It's to have experiences that we can't have outside the game, perhaps. That's one reason. Like I can't fly on a dragon in this physical reality, what we quote unquote physical, but I can do it inside a video game. And so, that type of experience. Now, the game of life, as we know it, I think is not, first of all, it's not a game that's just all great fun. Right? Because we all have challenges. And so going back to what I was saying earlier, the guy who created that very first video game called Pong, with a guy named Nolan Bushnell. He started a company called Atari, which was a very well-known video game company. And when I was a kid, we used to play Atari games. And he said the key to the game is to make it easy to play, but difficult to master. Right? And because of that, you have to keep playing it again and again. And that's what I think is a good metaphor for life. It's easy to play. You're here, you're playing the game, but it's not so easy to master. And so that's what these challenges, make us believe about the world, that the world is real. And if you don't have the challenges, you're going to get bored. Now, this month is actually the 25th anniversary of the movie, The Matrix, which is quite popular here in the US. I don't know how popular it
all over the world, right?
All over the world, right? Yeah.
Yes.
It's very popular. In The Matrix, the world that Keanu Reeves, is living turns out to be a computer-generated reality. But what he learns is that the first version of The Matrix was not this dull, gray, challenging place. Instead, it was a very ideal, lovely world where everybody was happy. And he said that the human mind didn't accept that as reality. And so they had to create a world that was darker and more challenging in order for us to get completely engrossed in it. It's the same as a movie. If you go to watch a movie like an Indiana Jones film, like Raiders of the Lost Ark, if at the beginning, if they just gave him the map to the Ark, it would be a boring movie. So there has to be challenges. There have to be challenges. And that's part of, this idea of viewing the world as a video game, is to learn to view our challenges as part of the game. And perhaps the people that have more challenges, whether they're born physically disabled or they're born into a really difficult situation, maybe they're more advanced players because their difficulty level is actually higher than the people who are born, with a very easy life where everything happens easily.
So would you say, if you just talk about advanced players, that raises another question. Would you say people who are on top of the elite status in the world, would they be considered advanced players because they're playing the game of global community?
Well, that is one way to look at it. But another way to look at it is perhaps they are early players who have strong desires and karma to rule things and to run things, right? And so, depending on the nature of the game, what is considered an advanced player versus not. And so for this, I like to turn to this idea that exists within the Islamic traditions and the Judeo-Christian traditions, but it ties very closely to the idea of karma. And that is called the scroll of deeds. So in Islam, the scroll of deeds is a list of everything you've ever done. And there are these two angels that are writing down all of your good deeds and your bad deeds. And what happens at the end of life is that the book, the scroll of deeds, is open and you have to look at your own deeds. Now, you don't just look at your deeds, you have to look at the repercussions of those deeds. Like, how did those deeds affect other people? And so the metaphor, obviously, that doesn't mean there's an angel with a feather pen writing down, today, Rizwan got up and got on a podcast, right? It's more, today we would say we're recording the whole thing, the experience, in a three-dimensional holographic format, because you can do that in a video game, right? And then we will replay it for you. And so it turns out, I don't know if you've had any near-death experiencers on your podcast. You probably have, right?
Yeah.
But many of them report what's called a life review. And they say they have to go back and they have to review every little thing that happened in their life, even things they'd forgotten about. But they see it in full three dimensions, right? As if they were inside a virtual reality. And there was a gentleman named Daniel Brinkley, who's a good friend of mine, who wrote a book called You know him? Yeah, he was at
the know him a long time.
And so he was struck by lightning. And he was the person who first told me about this idea of the holographic panoramic life review. And so I'm a scientist and a computer engineer. And so I said, how could this work? Well, it turns out it could work pretty easily if we can record the game, which we can. And in Silicon Valley, and elsewhere now, even in Asia, streaming of video games is extremely popular. Right. And young kids like to watch a YouTube recording. In fact, the most popular content on YouTube is video game sessions, right? Recorded video game sessions. And I remember when my nephew, he was like 3 years old, he would tell his father, my brother, I want to see Star Wars. He goes, oh, you mean the movie? No, no, no. I want to see the man and the woman play the Star Wars game on YouTube, right? And so it's a re-recording of this 3D world. And so it turns out the scroll of deeds or the life review, which is the basis for karma, because those are the items when you have to re-experience it, you have to replay it from the other person's point of view. So you have to see how you made the other person feel. So it's not just a replay, but you're re-experiencing the moment, right? And so if you record everything in a complicated, much more advanced game than we have, you can replay the emotions, and then you can say, okay, this is the actual feelings of suffering that you caused. And that's what ties to the scroll of deeds. And that's why, for me, the nature of the game is more about how we treat other people. We also have our own quests. Some people in this life review, they say that their guides or their beings of light tell them, okay, what did you do in this life? What did you plan to do? And what did you actually do? Right? Because we forget, we cross, what's called the river of forgetfulness as a metaphor, right? Or in the Chinese traditions, you have Meng Po, the goddess of forgetfulness, who brews the tea of forgetfulness. So as we come into this life, we forget about that. But I think the nature of the game is given by how we evaluate ourselves. We are the judges. And it says this in the Quran. It says this, that your own reckoning is sufficient, right? People, I think, misinterpret the idea of judgment day in the West, right? And with karma, it's clearer that you have to then re-experience that, and you have to keep building up that karmic database, if you will, until you can get it down and you decide to stop creating karma in the moment. But if we can look at how we evaluate ourselves, that tells us the nature of the game, right? And so that is, I think, so the more advanced players, I think, recognize the nature of the game is how people treat each other, more so than how much money or how much they rule, but also how much suffering did you cause and how much help did you give to other people. I think more advanced players also may come in, just like you might go into a game and help some of the less advanced players. I used to play a virtual world called Second Life, which was really popular maybe 10, 15 years ago. And you would have a virtual character, and people would, they would have virtual houses and get virtually married with wives and husbands. And they would have a job in the virtual world. They would have to show up at like 9 p.m. at the virtual bar to be the virtual bartender, right? But in that world, when you first start, you don't really know what's going on. So you ask the advanced players, right? And so I think advanced players are there also to help guide folks. But I think sometimes they might go through more difficulties than those people that maybe aren't as advanced, in my opinion.
Wow. I have a question though, Tina.
Yeah, please do ask, Natalie. Your turn. Yes, we all have a lot of questions. I'll let Natalie lead.
Regarding to this karma, and you said that everything is being recorded somewhere, maybe in cloud database. So where exactly in this simulation world, where is karma being recorded?
Right. So in a video game, you have the rendered world, then you have information that's not in the rendered world. But you can see it as a user, as a player, I can see it. So for example, in Zoom, right, I can pull up the participants window, but you won't see that like in my screen, right? So the rendered world is where the character is moving around the world. But in video games, we call it like a HUD, a heads-up display. So it's like extra information about your character, like what's in your inventory, what's your health, what's your, what's the quest that you've accepted. And you may even have a little map, but it's not part of the pixelated world. And so karma as a database, I believe, exists outside the physical world, but it's the physical world from a scientific perspective. Okay, so let's switch gears slightly, and then we'll come back to the spiritual perspective. In the scientific world, the reason why I think this is a serious hypothesis to consider is that there is no such thing as matter in the physical world. The scientists keep trying to find it, right? So I might have this Starbucks coffee cup. It looks like it's solid, but when you look inside, it's 99% empty space. between the molecules. And then you look inside the molecules and it's 99% empty space between the atoms. And then you look inside the atoms and you keep going. And in the end, they can't find anything. Like the smaller it gets, like those Russian Matryoshka dolls, I think they're called. Right? And the only thing they can find at the bottom is information. So there was a famous physicist named John Wheeler. He worked with Einstein at Princeton. He worked with Niels Bohr. These guys were the founders of relativity and quantum mechanics. And he had a phrase at the end of his life. He only died in I think 90s or 2000, so very recently. But he was old enough to have worked with all these guys, these quantum physicists. He came up with the phrase later in life. And he said early in life, he thought everything was a particle, like a solid particle. And then he said at the end of his life, he began to realize that everything is just information. So he said, what we call a particle is just bits of information. It's an answer to a series of yes-no questions. And what is a yes-no question? It's a 1 or a 0. It's a bit. So he had a phrase called it. So this is an it, which is my coffee cup, is actually from bits. So anything that's in it really just consists of bits of information. That's in the physical world. Now, in the video game world, that's true and in Zoom, that's true. Again, I'm only seeing bits of you rendered on my screen. I'm not seeing the real you. And so, the analogy is that the world takes information and then it renders, but it only renders the part that we can see, right? So, for example, I happen to be in Tempe, Arizona, which is just outside of Phoenix at the moment, but you guys can't see the rest of Tempe right now. Your computer only has to render the pixels in my room because those are the only ones that my character can see. And so in quantum mechanics, we have this weird problem called the observer effect that nobody understands, but many people have written about and talked about. And the idea is that there are many possibilities, but the probability wave collapses to a single one, but nobody knows why. So one of the reasons that I put out in my book, the simulation hypothesis, why, is that it's an optimization technique. You don't have to render everything. It's only that which the player observes. That is what gets rendered. And the same with Fortnite or World of Warcraft. Or there's a video game called No Man's Sky. Okay, it has 18 quintillion planets. That's a very big number, quintillion, right? And the reason it's so big is 2 to the power of 64, so it's 64 bits. But all of those planets don't get rendered on your screen at any given time. It's only where your character is. And so we optimize. And computer science is all about information processing, and it's all about reducing the amount of information you need to send over the wire. Like the reason we can send videos, if I were to send you this entire video file, we would not be able to speak real time. So we have compression algorithms, MPEG-4, the .mov or QuickTime, like they all compress this down. And so information optimization is pretty much how we do things in computer science. And so getting back to your question, is where is this information stored? I would say it's stored outside of the rendered world. And by the word rendered, it means that which you are observing, right, gets rendered. But I believe that our players have access to this. So that means the part of ourselves that's outside of this reality, that's kind of looking in and watching ourselves in this particular reality. And so I think it exists in a database, but it gets carried over between lives. So it's not in the physical body, right? And in some traditions, they say it's in it's stored in the astral or the etheric or the causal bodies,
so
right? But I'm taking a different.
Record? Can I say
yes,
Akashic record?
Yes. Yeah, I would say the Akashic records is a good, nice analogy of what I'm calling the database in the cloud, right?
So
and
that
so
means,
how do people, yeah.
I'm sorry that I interrupt, but your
absolutely.
point is when you say that the data, everything is stored and it's not in the rendered world. So that means someone are watching, right? Now many people
Yes.
watching us that not in the game, and everything is recorded, not in this world, but in Akashic record.
Yes, that's right.
Am I understanding correctly? Is that right?
Yes, exactly. And what I'm saying is the Akashic record is a analogy or a metaphor for, that term comes from a long time ago, right? And so today, when we try to visualize the Akashic records, how do we visualize it? Some people say, imagine a big library, right, with all these books, and each book you can open up is one of your lives. But you open up the book, but it's not a book. You see three-dimensional images of the life. Like you can actually see the movie running, right? So what I'm saying is what that sounds like is more like an actual database and computer interface system, not like a physical library, right? The Akashic records. But yes, I think that is very synchronous with what I'm saying today. Yeah.
Wow. So who are the players then? That would be a lot of people would ask, like, so who are the players? Who's your player, Rizwan? Who's my player? Who's Natalie player? Are they playing in, I mean, another question I have too, in this third dimensional world, do we have more than one avatar
Yeah.
playing in this existence, but also are there a different game in a different dimension or realities as well? So I believe there's 12, 13 a reality or dimension in this construct, right? And this universe. Are they all games? Are there many layers of that game in different dimensions? So who are
Yeah.
actually a real player?
Right. So who is the player? That's the big question that everyone asks, right? And different people have different ideas about that. And so, my second book on simulation is actually called The Simulated Multiverse. And the idea is that as we play the game, we can actually play out different versions of what might happen along the way. And so this goes back to quantum mechanics, right? So I talked about the observer effect. And the best way to talk about the observer effect is to use the Schrodinger's cat example. I believe you can see it on the screen. The Simulated Multiverse is the book that talks about this. And so with the Schrodinger's cat example, the idea is that there's two states of this cat. It's both alive and dead at the same time. Now, common sense tells us it can't be both. I mean, it has to be either alive or dead. You can't have, a cat that's both alive and dead. But quantum mechanics tells us, no, you have both of these possibilities. And then when you observe one of them, we end up collapsing the probability wave. But the alternate explanation that physicists have come up with for this is called the multiverse effect. And many people know this from superhero movies, right? If you've seen the Spider-Man or the Marvel movies where they have multiple versions of Spider-Man or they have multiple versions of Batman or Superman, it comes from this core idea that in one world, the cat is alive, and in another world, the cat is dead. And so every time we make a decision, according to physics, we could be branching out new worlds. The problem with that is you end up with too many worlds. You end up with so many physical worlds. But if they're just computed or simulated worlds, then it's okay. All that means is you're trying out these different possibilities on your computer. So many people report, for example, in a life review or what's called a life preview, right? So for people who go back, get hypnotized before birth, and they remember the place in between. And some of them remember a life preview where they looked at a computer screen and they could change the dials and they could go forward in time and say, oh, if I married this person, this is what my life would look like. But if I, went to, England and lived in London, then this is what my life would look like. And maybe I'll marry this other person. Like there's different ways. And so I view that almost as like a multiverse of possibilities. So I think we have these graphs of possibilities of places that we might go and that we plan those out, but it is possible for us to be running multiple versions of the game, right? You can actually run the game multiple times. And it could be in parallel at the same time. It could be on different computers. When we run simulations of like the weather or of the pandemic or of anything, right? Or, of particle simulations for rocket ships. We never run just one. We always run more than one simulation. Why? Because we want to see what might happen if we change the variables and we do X, Y, Z, right? And sometimes in life reviews, people report this too. Say, well, what if I had done something different? oh, then this is what your life would have looked like, right? And so what does that mean? That this is what your life, how could they possibly show you that unless it actually happened somewhere in some level, right? And so I like to think of that as a running of the game. You can run the game multiple times, and so you can have multiple simulations. And so back to your question, who is the player, which is, you know, the big question, right? I mean, some people say, if you take a less scientific point of view, I mean, a less spiritual and more scientific point of view, people talk about, well, it could be of us playing, you know, like as if we are playing a game of ancient Rome, right, of ancestors, or it could be aliens. On the more spiritual side, you say, well, it's God. God has set up this game for us. I like to take the point of view that it's us, right? We are the co-creators of the game, and we are the players of the game. And so each of us has played a role in creating different aspects of this game. And perhaps the more advanced players are able to manipulate the game, and they're able to do, you know, they remember that they're the player in the game. They remember that it's a dream world. They can create a palace out of thin air in the middle of the Himalayas, right? Because all it takes is rendering that specific model if you have it. And so I like to say it's us and it's more advanced players and guides that are watching the game with us, but that we're not aware of it. And so in the video game world, there's a term called NPC. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that term. It's a non-player character. And so in a video game, the NPCs are just the AI characters, right, that are playing it. And then there's the players who have characters that they're controlling, which would be my avatar, is what we call it, right? So we have our avatars and we have NPCs. Now, in the Matrix, you know, Neo and Morpheus and all these guys had the player outside, you know, with the brain computer interface, and they had their character inside the game. But Agent Smith was just code, right? So he was just a character in the game. And so, you know, many people wonder, are we NPCs inside a game, or are we actually conscious players, right? And you can have a video game with both, right? You can have players and NPCs. It's not mutually exclusive. And so the way that I like to think of it is that sometimes we go into NPC mode, right? Which means we're just going off of the coding, the programming from this life. But every now and then we get connected back to our player. And so now we're in player mode where we're remembering and the player is taking control. And maybe we're doing things the wrong way and we need a course correction, right? And that's where I think our player plays a role, and our guides who work with the players to say, this is what you were supposed to do. I'll give you a really good example from my own life, which to me was a tragedy, but it was a tragedy with a purpose, right? So I was in Silicon Valley. I sold my company, you know, was very successful. You know, we made millions of dollars, and I was an investor. I was running a program at MIT, and then I started to have heart problems, right? And I had to get heart surgery. This was about 5 years ago now. And suddenly I could no longer do, you know, all these things that I was doing in the business world. And while I was recovering, I had a really long recovery. They said, oh, you'll be fine after a few months. But it took me years to recover. But during that time, I was drifting in and out of consciousness. Like during the recovery period, I would just sit at home and I would go into a trance or a dream state. And I got very clear visions while I was there, right? And there were many different types of visions, but one of them was when there was a clear message to me that you were supposed to do something in your life plan. The first part of your life plan was to be an entrepreneur. You've done that. Now stop trying to make money. The second part of your plan was that you were supposed to write books. And I had written my first book or two. I had written 2 books in 10 years, but I was not, you know, spending time on those books. It was a book called Zen Entrepreneurship, which was about, which was about my life as an entrepreneur, trying to do some spiritual things, and a book called Treasure Hunt about synchronicity and glitches in the matrix. But again, that wasn't my focus. It was more like a hobby. And so I clearly got in these visions, now it's time to really write. And so every time when I would start to recover and I would try to jump back into the business world, I would get another problem and I have to go back to the hospital and do another heart procedure, which, trust me, is no fun. But during that time, while I was recovering, the one thing I could do is I could write. And I could basically take Uber, because I couldn't even drive for many months, to Starbucks and do a few hours of writing each day. And in the 9 months of recovery, I just wrote and published 2 books, one with a very prestigious academic publisher, Columbia University Press, and one was The Simulation Hypothesis, which went on to become a best-selling book. And for me, it was very clear, the message of this tragedy, which was what I like to call a course correction, right? It was, okay, you're still going in this direction. It's okay before, but now you got to shift to this direction, and you get a wake-up call that makes you shift to this direction, right? And so I think that happens, and I think that our players are constantly working on these plans. Like, there are certain things we might do, but then there are certain other things they say, well, we're off track, we need to change something, right? So the lords of karma, as they're called metaphorically, or what we might call in Dungeons and Dragons, which is a really old game we used to play with, with paper, and there would be a dungeon master. And the dungeon master would say, okay, let's change things. Let's throw in a new villain. That's going, because you guys it's too easy. We're going to throw in a new challenge for you now. I'm going to bring on a level 50 monster to get in your way, right? And so I view, like, in this case, my heart surgery and recovery was like my level 50 monster, right? It was something I couldn't ignore, right? And it put me on a completely different path, within my life. And that's why I'm talking to you today, right? If I hadn't shifted my focus, I wouldn't be talking to you about spiritual stuff and simulation and video games. I would be in Silicon Valley trying to make more money, which is what they do in Silicon Valley. And so, I needed a course correction.
That's a great example. And not only you actually talk about that question, glitches in the matrix, right?
Right.
You mentioned that you want to know about that one.
So, lately I think I have my own experience. So I have been searching about glitches in the matrix. I have seen so many videos, so many clips. And how I want to ask you, since we are in a video game, a giant, massive video game, and we are in the same game, right? So actually, I have several questions, but start with these glitches. Is it possible that we can experience glitches in this video game? And if it's possible, how that happened? Why glitches happening to us and some of us, not all of us at once?
Yes, I think that's a good question. So let's start with your question. Are we all in the same game, right?
Right.
We think we're all in the same game, right? But when you play a video game and you play with other players, you could be standing right next to each other, but one of you could see the dragon and the other person can't see it. Why? Because we have different levels of characters with different abilities. And most importantly, when you play the game, it gets rendered on everybody's computer or everybody's phone, right? So in the same way that I can change my Zoom background right now, and I could change it to be like the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge, right? So I could look and I could see my painting back there of some, strange science fiction planet, but you would see the bridge of San Francisco behind me, right? And so we are in the same game, but it doesn't mean we're rendering the exact same things, because each of us is rendering it on our own device, quote unquote device. What is the device that we're rendering? Whether it's the brain, the physical brain, or it's the mind, you can decide what you want that to be. But what that idea means is that we can change things and see things slightly differently. Now, inside a video game, information may be stored outside the game that we're not aware of. And so, one type of glitch, we'll get to the physical glitches in a minute, but one type of glitch that I'm most interested in is a synchronicity. And synchronicity is when, I'm sure you guys have heard the term and maybe even talked about it on the show, where you have an inner thought and it matches some outer event, and those two things, kind of end up going together in ways that you weren't sure about. Like, for example, a few years ago, I had sold my last company, and I thought, oh, it might be nice to go back to MIT, to the media lab at MIT, and do something, because I studied there as a undergraduate many years ago. And I looked online and I didn't find anything related that I could do there. So I said, okay, maybe it was just a random thought. And then a few weeks later, a professor who works right in the media lab, MIT Media Lab building, emails me and says, hey, let's get together. I'm coming to Silicon Valley. You do video games. I'm in the game lab as part of the media lab. And so for me, that was an interesting synchronicity, because I had just thought about this idea, and now I got an external validation of that. And so that might seem like it's some kind of manifestation or magic, but if we know there's information, and every time we think, as I was talking about earlier, we're putting the karma in the database just from even our desires sometimes, right? That if something else matches. Now, the other day, I was looking for a backpack to buy online, right, on my computer. And then later I was on my phone and I was looking for, I was just in Facebook, just scrolling, nothing. And I see an ad for the exact backpack that I was shopping for online. Now, if I didn't know anything about computers, I would say, oh my God, that's a synchronicity. That's magic. I thought this and here it is. But the truth is, there is some information behind the scenes that gets tracked, that is called a cookie, and it gets put in a database. And the fact that I was searching for it shows that I had a desire for it. And so they use that information to render, the ad. And what I'm saying is that is actually what's happening in the physical world as well, is that there's information that's being used to render things. Now, in The Matrix, if you watch the movie The Matrix, there was a famous scene of a glitch. There was a cat that walks by the door, and then he sees the same cat walk by the door again, right? And so that was like a deja vu, right? Because it was like, wait, I just saw that, or a feeling, and they called it a glitch in the Matrix. And the term, even goes all the way back to science fiction writer Philip K. Dick, who talked about this idea all the way back in 1977, that we live in a computer programmed reality. And what he said was that sometimes variables are changed and the simulation is rerun. And so you would think you're having the same experiences, but something has changed. But yet you have this funny deja vu that you've already done this before, right? And it may be because you've already done it before, because we're rerunning the same scenes again to try it with different potential things. And so another type of glitch comes from different weird memories, like the Mandela effect, which I don't know if you guys have talked about, but this idea that some people remember a different possible past, like they remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison rather than becoming the president of South Africa, or they remember a movie that never existed called Shazam or Kazam, or in China in Tiananmen Square, the guy that was run over by the tank wasn't run over by the tank, but many people remember him being run over by the tank in a bloody scene. And so you remember these weird things that didn't actually happen. How's that possible? Right? Some people say that's just faulty memory, but I say it's actually possible. And this is what my book, The Simulated Multiverse, is about, is it's possible if you rerun that and you rerun it again. And so Philip K. Dick came to believe that his novel, The Man in the High Castle, which was about, it became an Amazon series. I don't know if either of you have seen it, but Germany and Japan won World War II in that war. And then they divided up the United States. The eastern part was ruled by Germany and the western part was ruled by the Empire of Japan at that time. And that was a very dark vision of America, right? But he came to believe that really happened as a timeline. But then the simulators decided, let's change the variable and go this way. And now we're in a timeline where that didn't happen. But that doesn't mean there aren't many different timelines that have run. And so it's possible that we're seeing the remnants of different timelines or different runs of the simulation. And that could be why certain people see certain things and other people don't see certain things. There is something called a lag, right? Also, so like right now, Tina has this background, but if she moves, right, you can kind of see a lag, right? There, you can see it, right? And so that happens as an artifact of rendering the simulation. And so if we're overloading the simulation at certain points, or certain people are watching certain things, that they can see the lag more easily than other people can, becoming more aware. Now, I use the analogy of the video game, but go back to the analogy I talked about earlier of 100 years ago, which is the world is like a movie projector, right? And I said Swami Yogananda used this to say, you're looking at the screen, but if you're ever in a movie and you look away from the screen, right, I mean, everybody's engrossed in the movie, but you look around and you see these flashes of light because the frames, that's what a movie is. A movie is just one frame after another frame, right? But you can see that. So I also think that if certain people are looking away from screen, in this case, the video game, they'll notice the lags and the glitches more than other people would. But it could also be that actually happened. This car came through here and crashed, but then that scene was rewound because that was deciding not to be the best scene. But you remember it because perhaps you're more either awake, or what I like to say is in the Matrix. If you remember in the Matrix, they had this wire into the back of the head, right? And so the more you forget the world around you, or my virtual reality helmet when I was playing ping pong, right? The more you are forgetful, the more you have drank this tea of forgetfulness, the less you are likely to remember that this actually might have actually happened. And so that might be why you catch a glimpse of it, because you're catching a glimpse of this other run of the simulation. Those are different types of glitches. And I think there are many more, that happen. I think we sometimes get precognitive dreams, right? So we have a dream of something, and then that day something happens that reminds us of the dream. But it happened before. The dream happened before the physical event. How does that work? Well, I think it's just us planning the simulation, planning what's going to happen. When we're asleep, I think some of us, we're just, usually what we're doing when we're asleep is we're regurgitating what the Tibetan Buddhists call karmic traces, right? So there's big karma and little karma, right? And so big karma are the things that make it into the database. The little karma are the things that we've been thinking about during the day that are making impressions on us, but we don't want to put them in the database. So we have to do something that in computer science, we call it garbage collection. We have to clean up the memory, right? And so, if you're old enough, you may remember when computers used to crash more often. Windows computers especially used to crash all the time. And the problem was they didn't clean up the memory. There was just too much memory. And so garbage collection, I mean, it's an actual technical term we use in computer science, which goes through and cleans up all these things in memory that we don't need anymore. And so, little karma basically gets cleaned up in our dreams, right? The dreams are like little mini simulations for us, right? That are created. And you've probably had a time when you saw something on TV and it made an impression on you, and then later you see something like that in the dream, right? It's a way of cleaning up that karmic impression so that it doesn't have to go to the database. It's just a small little karma, and a dream is enough to resolve that karma. On the other hand, if it's bigger karma, then that goes in the database and has to be there for a while. But sometimes in our dreams, I think we're also planning out what might happen. So we're running these different scenarios and saying, here's a scenario that might happen or that's likely to happen. And then if you remember that, the next day you feel like there's a glitch, there's something weird is happening because you already saw it in your dream, and now it's playing out. It's kind of like planning to have that scene in your game.
I see. So you said there are many types of glitches. So I understand example that you brought up from the movie, The Matrix, the cat, but how about the type of these glitches that things just disappear? Like I experienced myself, I wasn't sure. What was that? Am I crazy? Or what happened to me? And many people, actually, I put my experience out there, and lots of people wrote comments on my video about the experience about very similar thing. So I tell you very quickly, and I want to know what's your thoughts about this. What is your idea in this simulation world? So one day I was sitting with my family, and I have two bowls next to each other, and I have a middle spoon, like so small spoon, like a teaspoon, inside these small bowls. And at just some moment, I did not see a spoon. A spoon disappeared in front of me. And I literally, I was the one put the spoon in these two bowls. So there were two spoons, and then one disappeared. And I was thinking, who removed the spoon? So I took the spoon from the other bowl and put it in that spoon, that bowl. The spoon was disappear. And then the moment when I put the other spoon, it hit each other and it makes sound cling, and the spoon came back. And I was like, I must be crazy. So this situation, can it be a glitch, or I'm just like going crazy?
Oh no, I think it certainly could be a glitch. And for some reason, spoons tend to come up often in this idea of glitches in the Matrix. If you remember the scene in the Matrix where, they bent the spoon, right?
Right, but this case it disappeared, and only me that did not, I mean, did not see the spoon. But everybody else, my son was saying that, am I blind? The spoon was right there, but I swear I did not see. And many people experience very similar situation. So what do you say about this? What type of glitch and how that happened in this simulation world? I mean, give me the concept on that. I was a software engineer, so I got what you were saying, the computer terminologies like garbage collection, all that. So I have an idea what you're talking about, but where is that disappear? I try to link to how we program, because I was a programmer before too.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, so, this reminds me of, and I do get people sharing these kinds of experiences with me all the time too, where, something happened and then it's gone, but then it's back and they're not sure. And there was a video of a woman cutting a lemon.
I saw that.
Phoenix.
I saw the same video.
Saw that. So NBC News asked me to comment on a little article I wrote about it that they were writing about it. And then it was back together and she had to cut it again, right? And so, there are these many different types of glitches, but I think they come up because we're rendering the world as we go. So getting back to this idea that one person might see the spoon saying it was there all the time, and the other person is not seeing the spoon, right? And so this reminds me of a story that I was told by a famous UFO researcher. I don't know if you know Jacques Vallée. He was part of Project Blue Book all the way back in the 60s. He's still around today. He's in his 80s. But he told me that he would investigate these UFO reportings where one person saw the UFO and the other person standing next to them didn't see it, right? And it's just a very strange thing because we think either the UFO is there or it's not there, right? It has to be one or the other. It can't be both, right? And then you had these other experiences where these people say the UFO came and it went right, landed at a 45-degree angle. And then he looked and he said, but there's these giant redwood trees that are here. If it came at that angle, it would have to go like right through the trees. They said, yeah, that's what happened, but we didn't want to say that because that just sounds crazy. We don't want to tell anybody else that. We're telling you. And, within video games, that's happens all the time because while you're rendering something, it's not quite physical until it gets fully rendered. I mean, you can actually move through walls and stuff, and you can do these different things. But I think it's a glitch of the rendering system while you're actually rendering it, right? And so it could be, and for some reason, I think metal in particular, is more amenable to this type of thing, right? People talk about, pennies coming up, like when spirits of the dead are around and they see these aports or these objects that weren't there and they suddenly appear. But it seems like with certain kinds of metal, that happens a lot more. So I think this type of glitch is interesting, and it could just have to do with the rendering algorithm that's there, or it could have to do with somebody else. There could be other players or entities in the game with you that are like changing these things. So one of the areas that I researched was the old stories of jinn or genies, right, in the Islamic tradition. And turns out, there are many stories where there are these genie who can make an object disappear and reappear, right? So they can take it from them And in Autobiography of a Yogi, there's a famous story of a guy who had an entity called Hazrat, and he used him to like deal. He would say, there's a gold ball, some jewelry, some train tickets, and then later they would just disappear and end up in his hands, right? And he claimed to have this invisible entity that would actually make these objects appear and disappear. And so I started to do research to find out, are there other stories like this? And then within the Islamic traditions, there are stories of these entities that can change physical objects and modify things, but they're not allowed to change our memories, right? So we are actually able to remember it. And so, I can't say for sure what happened in your case, but it's one, I would say that it is possible, right? When you're rendering, sometimes things just don't get rendered, right? There's a lag, there's something going on with the server. You see the scene. If you played a video game, it happens all the time when you first go teleport somewhere. Like there's an object that's missing and you go walk into that part of the room, and then later the plant gets rendered because it was there. So I think there's a computer science explanation, and then there are more esoteric explanations that can come into play for these things. But I believe that it certainly could have happened, and objects can appear and disappear, in the simulation all the time.
I would say that's kind of the same thing in spirit world, where some people will see the spirit and some people just don't see it right there. It is,
Yeah.
I mean, listening to you, that I would say that's the glitch also, but they do exist, do they? I mean, let's say spirit in a different dimension.
Yeah.
Because,
and
they say that they can have a different or more than one dimension bridge, or the veil's open. I mean, how's that work in this matrix too?
Well, you can run different, versions of the same, of the same game, or even a different game, right? So in this experience, our simulation is sort of the first level, right? There may be other simulations beyond that. Like if you ever woken up in a dream within a dream, right? That are slightly different types of simulations where things are easier to change, for example. And some people call that the astral, right? Where you can just think of things and you can just change things, right? And in our simulation, manifestation takes a little more work than that for most people, unless you're some advanced spiritual master who can manifest. But there are also many stories in different traditions of these entities that are living beside us. And like I mentioned, the genies or the jinn, and they pop in and they pop out of the reality. And then they go back to their world, right? And there are even instances of people remembering what, a time slips, or they wake up and everything's different. Like they're in the same place, but the writing is different and the people are speaking a different language or something, right? And each of those is like a separate simulation that's running. But if we're running on the same computational infrastructure, right, then we're using the same memory in a certain way and a certain amount of CPUs, right? So it's very possible that, if garbage collection isn't done correctly, that you can see images of things that were there from the past, or that were there from a different gameplay session. So it would be like the same game or a different session. But what's most intriguing to me are the stories of, in the Islamic traditions, you have stories of this man who married this jinn woman who had his children. And then later she said, I'm going back to the jinn world and you'll never see me again. And then they disappear, right? And then in the Western traditions, in Ireland and England, you have this idea of the fairies who take people into the world, the fairy world, and you're not supposed to eat the bread. If you eat the bread, then you're stuck there, right, in that world. And so, and then today we have more modern stories of these alien abductions and people coming in. And, I heard somebody tell a story recently about this young man, had this woman, he had sex with her, and later she said, I'm an alien, and she changed in front of him. And then she said, I'm taking the not the baby, in this case, she was pregnant, back to the world, and you'll never see us again. But you hear the same weird stories today that, we heard hundreds or thousands of years ago, but now they involve aliens and other types of entities. But I think that we could all be running our own versions of the timelines that have different parameters, but for them, they can come back into this timeline. So they figured out how to pause the simulation and jump back into a different timeline within the simulation. And then they disappear back out of this. So that's my theory of how this stuff, could possibly be working. But with ghosts, and some people not seeing the ghost, I think that just gets back to, we do this in video games all the time, right? If you and I are in the same room and you're level 30, you may have a spell that says, I can see the goblins, right? And my character doesn't have that spell or ability. And so the server decides. When the server sends the information to you, it decides what information you're allowed to see and render, and what information your computer shouldn't render. And so, if you look at these ghost stories, and some of them will actually say, the ghosts say, oh, I let you see me, or you're not, they weren't supposed to see me, but so there's this idea of perhaps the other, and we even have a ghost mode inside video games. You can put your avatar inside a room and nobody can see you because it's a ghost, but on your screen you can see everything that's happening because they're not rendering your avatar in that scene. And so there's rules and logic that get applied as part of, that's why I like to use this word rendering, because I think that gives us a better sense of the physical world as being drawn or rendered for us. And when that happens, because it's not a shared rendering, we think it's a shared rendering, but it's really not. We're all rendering it on our own virtual reality headsets, our own brains, or our soul is rendering it, if you will, outside. That's why I think we can sometimes see different things.
I heard you mention about we sending information back to the server, and the server will send something back and rendering our world, right? So it seems like we are playing as a character by following pre-script.
Well, if you think of a game, yeah.
Are we following a script?
So it sounds like everything pre-scripted, yes, except that it has you have like a destination or but then you do have variable, like what you just said, like a big karma and then the minor karmas. Is that how it works? It's already been.
So we have these scripts of possible things we might do. So if you look inside a game today, a video game, it seems like it's not entirely pre-scripted. You can go left, you can go right, you can go do this, and so you can still choose certain things. But I believe when we choose our character, right, at the beginning, we say, okay, this character is more likely to be, a computer programmer. This character is more likely to be an NBA basketball player. This character is more likely to be, a politician, right, or a podcaster, right? And these become possible quests. But then we don't always have to pursue those quests. We're still free to not choose. So, for example, when I graduated from college, I could have become an entrepreneur, or I could have gone to graduate school to get a PhD and become an academic. And in this life, I chose to become an entrepreneur at that time, because I feel like that was more of a strong calling for me at the time. And I spent, much of my career doing that. But I always had this idea of vision of me, being like a professor at a university. It was like this weird alternate life, if you will, right? Getting back to the multiple possible timelines. And so I believe that actually is something that I had chosen, as a possible life, but I chose not to follow that script. Right? So we have multiple scriptlets, I think, is what I would call them, smaller scripts. That's how we build video games today, by the way. We don't build it with just one straight script. We give you lots of different possible scripts, but we have a certain set that you have to do and others that are optional, right? And you can decide to do that. Now, later in my life, after becoming a writer for the past 5 years, I've re-entered academia, right? And now I'm actually a professor and working on a PhD, much later than like my friends who did it in their 20s, right? I'm doing it, much older, but it was a script, but it wasn't a script that I had to follow. Right? It was a script that I could follow. But I get the feeling that the writing of the books was such an important part of the script that when I wasn't spending time on them, I had this course correction, right? I believe. And I think that happens to us sometimes. Some people are better at getting their messages.
So all of us would love to see the script or know what's going to be the end game for all of us, right? Without taking a wrong turn in our course. How would we all figure that out, like connect to our main player and know, hey, this is the final destination. We shouldn't be like circling around our journey, but let's go right into it. How can we do that? I'm sure people would want to ask that question.
Well, I think many people would want to do that, but they think they would want to do that. So again, go back to my analogy of the Indiana Jones film, right? What does he get? He doesn't get the map to the Ark of the Covenant or the treasure at the beginning. What he gets is one clue at a time, and he has to follow that clue to find the next clue. And where does that lead? To the next clue. And sometimes he has to back up because he missed the clue, right? And then eventually, at the end of the movie, they end up and find the treasure. And I think that if we may think we want that, but if we chose to play the game, right, the game would not be any fun if we were able to know everything that was going to happen. And again, I'll go back to a line in the Quran and go back to my definition of Maya, right? It's not just an illusion. It's a carefully crafted illusion. It's one that we craft for ourselves, right, to make us forget so that we will take things seriously, right? Because some people would say, well, if this is an illusion, nothing matters. Nothing matters. I can kill people. I can do whatever, right? Right. And one guy did that. He shot people and went to court and said, I watched The Matrix too many times. And he tried to use the Matrix defense in court to say everybody's an NPC, therefore I killed them, but I shouldn't go to jail because it's not real. It didn't work. He still ended up in jail, right? But I think the danger if we do that is we end up not enjoying the game as much, right? And so we give ourselves certain clues, and sometimes we only give ourselves enough to keep going or to move in that direction, right? Because then we still have the element of free will to try to make those choices. And I think we just wouldn't enjoy it as much. I mean, if you saw, I said in the Quran, it's not just a delusion, it's an enjoyable delusion, right? Meaning that is the fun. So if we knew if we saw exactly how the guy did the magic trick of sawing the guy in half, we wouldn't like it as much. That said, I think we do get clues. I think we get hints, right, of the things we were meant to do. Like for me, writing a book didn't come out of the blue. I mean, I kind of knew back in high school, I was going to be a computer software programmer, an entrepreneur, and a writer. How did I know that, right? I think we have some of these scripts in mind. In Swami Yogananda's case, he wrote this best-selling book that introduced everybody in the West to yoga. But when he was a kid, he saw these yogis meditating in the Himalayas in a vision. And he said, who are you? He said, we're the yogis of the Himalayas. And he said, oh, I want to be like you. And he knew that at the age of 8, right? Like, how do you know that at the age of 8? Because I think we get clues. And one of the rules of clues is if they repeat, then it's more likely to be a clue than if it just happens once or twice, And so I think that the things that we keep being drawn back to again and again, that ends up being, and the people that we keep being drawn back to again and again, those are the hints of the plan, that are out there. And also I think our strengths and our weaknesses, right? I mentioned Dungeons and Dragons earlier. This is something, nowadays it's popular again, but it was a game in the 80s. And you would have a little character sheet and you would choose, okay, this is my character. It's an elf or a human or a dwarf, or you would choose the race. And then you would roll the dice and you would get all these attributes like strength, charisma, intelligence, how well you are, dexterous, or all these different abilities, magical abilities. And you would have those. And I think that we, believe it or not, have a similar thing going on when we choose our parents, our family, our physical, limitations that we might have, as much as I might want to manifest being an NBA player, that's not going to happen, given my physical constraints. Now, it could have if I had spent all my time. There was a guy my height in the NBA, one guy way back in 1984 who, was 5'6", but could be in the NBA. But, for the most part, that's not what I was called to. Now, there's a famous saying that to become an expert at something, you have to spend 10,000 hours doing something. And, whether you're a pilot or you're, a rock climber, and so I have some friends, and they've probably spent 10,000 hours rock climbing. They used to go every weekend for decades, right? And so my question is not, what could I become an expert if I spent 10,000 hours rock climbing? Question is, what makes a person spend 10,000 hours rock climbing? I had no desire to do that, right? But I did spend 10,000 hours programming, and I became an expert. Why is that? Why did I choose this? And it was easy. I didn't have to force myself. I didn't have to, read a motivational book. I can be a computer programmer. I didn't have to manifest it. It just happened naturally, and I ended up at MIT, and even there it was easy, right? MIT is a very difficult university, but computer programming for me was easy. Physics was hard, right? And it was just, we have our natural, I think, inclinations, and I think those are part of our stories and our scripts. And so I think we do get clues about the things that we were meant to do, but we don't always listen to the clues, and we don't always follow the clues, and sometimes we follow them for a while, but then we're so hard-headed we don't get the message that, okay, now you're done with that, karma, go do something else, right?
I think we don't listen when we become NPC, and then when we turn on our consciousness, then we get the clue, the hints, right? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that's
Excellent.
right. NPC mode. Yeah, I
Excellent.
think we all go into NPC mode, which is based on the conditioning we've had, right? And I spent a decade in Silicon Valley, and the only thing they think about there is the next startup, the next investing in the next Facebook, and making money, and that's all they think about, right? And so you get in that mindset, and then you're operating, and it happens in different industries and different places too, right? You're just operating off of the social programming and the programming of this life, rather than remembering back to, the overall plan that you might have had, I think, yeah. And that's NPC mode.
We don't have
Wow.
much time left.
I know. We're up to like an hour and 15 minutes, 20 minutes already. So yeah, definitely we don't have much time, but Natalie, I think we should invite Rizwan back again, because this is a
right?
very interesting topic.
Do we
Yes.
have just one more question? You can answer a quick one.
Okay, sure,
Do
absolutely.
we have time, Riz?
Yes, I can do one more question.
A very quick one. I'm just wondering, what if we feel like we're done with this game? What is next?
We don't want to play the game again, right? Is that what we're saying?
We feel like we done. We done with this game. Can we exit the game? Can we quit? What does that mean in this simulation world?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think this is one of those, it's not a simple question or an easy question at all. Because
maybe
people
the
will
next
say,
episode.
yeah,
this is a
might
good
be,
question. I have to say that. Yeah.
We're getting
Because
into the
I'm sure a lot of people
morality.
ask that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're getting into the morality of things like suicide and assisted suicide and suffering, right? What is the nature of suffering in this world? If that's the reason we want to leave the world, or is it more because we're just bored with the world? And why is that? Why is something that's so enchanting become so boring to us? Is it that we've been spending our time with the wrong people in the wrong places, and we haven't found that thing that we were here for? Or is it perhaps, tying back to our earlier discussion, we are not on the track we were meant to be, right? And so we say, I'm done with this. Or is it because we're just done with it and that we see that everything is a game and it's an illusion? So I think this is a bigger question, right? And I would say that, there's a reason we choose to be in this game. And, sometimes it feels like maybe we're done with the game, but maybe we're not done with it. Maybe we just think we're done with it, but there's still something there for us to learn or experience. Otherwise, we might have already exited naturally, right? Like people who get struck by lightning and come back, right? Maybe they had something to do still, even though the people who've had near-death experiences say, I want to stay. I want to stay in this beautiful world that's outside the physical world. I mean, Swami Yogananda said that ceaseless joy is not the nature of this world, of the physical world, right? And I think that's true. But that is the nature of a challenging game, I think. Yeah. So anyway, that's maybe not so short answer to your very complicated question. Not so easy question.
It's hard to answer that.
That's a great, honest answer, though. That's good, though. you actually have answered a lot of questions that's, very, very through and very good, Well, the
So,
time is up. Unless
yes,
you have more questions, Nolly.
a lot more, but I think we don't have more time anymore. So
Yeah.
where people can find you, I'm gonna bring your website.
Yes.
Yeah. So they can go to my website, which is zenentrepreneur.com, which is, the word Zen and then the word entrepreneur.com, all one word. They can also find me on social media, on Twitter or on Facebook as Zen Entrepreneur, or on Twitter as at Riz Stanford, like the university, or on Instagram as Riz Cambridge, like the university or the town of Cambridge.
Okay. Okay, yes.
There's a lot of way that people can connect with you, and yeah, definitely buy his books, and read up about it. I mean, when I attend your workshop and you got all this screen and all this visual aids, that's really, really, really good, Rizwan. So
Thank you. Yeah.
hopefully everyone, yes. I'm gonna put Natalie and I will put your website and everything, all information on the description, in our channel. So everyone can actually contact you and go to your website as well. Oh, you have courses and events too.
Yes, I want
I
to
do.
ask that. Do you still offer online courses or is a Zoom course? What is this courses about?
Well, some courses are on Zoom. So the simulation hypothesis, sci-fi, religion, science, and techno philosophy I offered in last fall. I also teach it at Arizona State University now. But yeah, there's a Zoom version, but I offered it like once a year. So I'll probably offer it again in the fall. And then I have book signings at various books or conferences that I go to. I'll be in London in May at Watkins Bookstore, for example. And then I'm sure I'll be at some conferences, in the fall as well. So people can go to my website or on Facebook for the latest, of where I'll be at any specific time. But yeah, so I do still offer some Zoom courses, and I'm going to also offer a study guide around my latest book, Wisdom of a Yogi, which is about yogic principles and the simulation. Probably again in the fall. In the summer, I won't be spending as much time teaching courses. But in the fall, I'll probably do that again.
Cool, cool. Love to learn more about him, the yogi. I think he's fascinating. So, wow, who wants to go to England? Let's go, guy, and get the book signed over there. Yes, yes.
Yeah, come get a book signing. Yeah, absolutely.
There you go. There you go. Well, Rizwan, Natalie, you got more questions? That's a lot, but maybe next time we can invite him to come back again. Yes. So, thank you so much, Rizwan, for all your time and this amazing information. And Natalie and I just, wow, by everything that you have shared. Definitely will. For some of you who are Thai or have Thai friends, you can bring direct everyone to either Natalie's site, Awakening with Natalie. I'm also going to put her link of her YouTube, her social media under my description as well. Or, you have any Thai friend who knows people or friend who speak English, understand English, you can come to my YouTube as well. So with that said, I want to thank you, Natalie, who's here, asking question with me, as well as Rizwan, who's here and answer all this question. Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rizwan. Thank you, Tina, too.
Thank you, Natalie. Amazing. Great question. I love the question. Even the last question you asked. Really good. Yes.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your question. So thanks so much for having me on.
We grill you.
I'm sure we'll have more
today.
I still have a lot more questions. And, when you link to that simulation world, it just like, I listened to you the first time at the Conscious Life Expo. I was just like, I got it. I got what he's saying because I was a software engineer before I wrote computers. So I was like, this is it. This really makes sense.
Yes.
Well, we hope that we can do this again when you have a chance, right? Okay.
Yes.
But thank you so much today. Thanks for your time. Thank
you, Rizwan, which is going to give you this, the Asian respect here.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me on. Yeah.
Have a
And look
nice
forward
time
to
in
seeing you again.
Arizona, yes, and also in England.
Yeah.
We'll see you
Okay.
around, Rizwan. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Bye.
All right, we're gonna end the meeting.